What's up, y'all? I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut, and this is episode 11 of Lawns Across America. Well, listen, I'm just going to start talking right here. I've actually tried to start this podcast literally like 8 times. I'm standing here in the garage studio, and I'm like trying to get it going, and I can't. So I'm just going to start talking. I want to welcome you all back to another podcast. Those of you that are here, I want to say thank you so much. The feedback that I've gotten on the podcast so far has been really helpful. It's been good. And from what I'm getting is a lot of you really do appreciate this format. So thank you so much for tuning in. I guess that's the best way to really start out, is just by telling you all thank you for listening. Now, the one thing that I kind of always start out, as you know, with like this monologue kind of thing or this beginning thought. And the one I want to talk about today is brown spots. You know, as lawns are greening up, in the South, your lawns are really greening up and starting to grow, unless you have Bermuda that's lagging a little bit in certain areas as far as it's a little bit slower to wake up. But everybody else, you're really starting to wake up now. You're really starting to come along, and you're noticing that there's brown spots in your lawn. Now, a lot of times, the first reaction that people have when they see brown spots is their first question is, what chemical do I put on that? You know, what fungicide do I need? Or what insecticide do I need? Or do I need to fert it harder? You know, there's always something that people want to throw down. And we're going to kind of revisit that concept a little bit in another way when it comes to some things later on in the podcast. But the idea isn't always to think about slinging chems. Sometimes let's just use some of our other senses. So when you start seeing brown spots in your lawn, especially a lot of you guys are new homeowners, you haven't experienced a season with your lawn yet, so you're not seasoned with the seasons with your lawn. And so because of that, you're not sure what to expect. And then I'm really going to zero in on some of you that are new construction. I would say that a very large percentage, 40, maybe even 50% of the questions that I get, it's related to new construction homes, which I think is a good sign for the economy and for the way that you guys are progressing. You're buying homes, or maybe that's just what our audience is, but you're buying new homes. There's a lot of home building, obviously, just from what I can see. It's kind of interesting to sit from here and see that. But when you have that new construction home, I want you to think about the challenges that are there that are different. And my home from Northwest Indiana was a new construction home. It was finished right at the end of 2004. So we actually moved in late December. And I remember it was all just nasty clay, giant pits and marks in it because everything was frozen. So they couldn't really do much of a good final grade. So it was just nasty. And I had to look at that all winter. But one of the things I noticed, because I seeded that lawn by hand starting that spring, is what I noticed is that there was a lot of debris. And I'm not blaming the construction crew. That's not a knock on contractors. You built a house there, you're gonna have stuff that's just gets fallen behind. Roof shingles, bricks, pieces of bricks that get cut off, pieces of wood, siding, just whatever. That stuff gets buried. Extra aggregate that was used underneath the pour of the driveway. Sometimes even the cement mixer will drips here and there. So you have, or the concrete mixer, sorry, let me use the correct terminology there. But you understand that in that dirt there, in that ground, there can be a lot of things. And what I'm leading to is that when you find brown spots in the lawn, the first thing I want you to do is get like a shepherd's hook or another piece of metal and just jam it in the middle of that hole. Just jam it down in there and see what you feel. I once had a customer, I'm not going to call his name out, but I certainly remember his name and I remember his address there on a cul-de-sac in Valparaiso, Indiana, just north of Route 30 there. And I remember that he had called us out there in June, and he was complaining that our technician had burnt his lawn in spots. Actually, that's not even how he said it. The call came in, and the reason I had to go out, I was the head ops manager at the time. This was probably about 2010, I would say. And the reason I had to go out, I was the head ops manager, was because this guy threw such a fit and threatened to sue us because our technician burned his lawn. So when you get those type of signal words from a customer, I would usually go out and handle those if I could, or at least one of my senior managers. But in this case, I did. And so I went out there, and there were about 7 or 8 spots all right along the driveway. And now this home at this time, this home was 2 years old. This was a very new home. I don't know when this guy had moved in, but the home was 2 years old. And what's interesting, this was June. This was early June, so still plenty of rains in Northwest Indiana. Temperatures are still mild. Kentucky bluegrass is at its premium in early June in Northwest Indiana in most cases. And I could see these brown spots. The rest of the lawn was double dark green. I must have had a technician that threw down a little bit of extra. We did have a lot of farmers in Northwest Indiana, and farmers tend to like to throw down heavy, at least the old school ones. That's not a knock on farmers at all. That's just what I knew from those old corn farmers out there. They like to throw down pretty hard, and I think we had a lot of farmers' kids working for us. But either way, this lawn was green, and it looked good, except for these spots. And these spots were not more than, I'm not, diameter, is that the right word? Diameter, circumference. Yeah, diameter across. These weren't more than 6 inches across. Sorry, I had to just picture what 6 inches look like there. These were not more than about 6 inches across, these holes or these brown spots. And literally the grass was just, you could see it was just boom, just a brown spot. It wasn't a perfect circle, but they were all spots, and there was 7 or 8 of them running right up maybe a couple feet off the driveway. Not necessarily in a footprint pattern, because that would be one of the first things we would look for. Nothing like that. The reason we would look for footprints, by the way, and then John Perry actually mentioned this in a video recently that he did on a golf course in Israel, of all places, but you see footprints in green grass, and you think one of two things, and I'm definitely stealing this from John Perry, but this is what we would do too when I worked for True Green, and we were kind of, solving mysteries. Is there's one of two things. If you're coming out of winter, which we were not in June in this case, but just to reiterate the point here, when you're coming out of winter, if you notice dead spots in the lawn that are footprint shaped or footprint distance or footprint pattern, you know what, you trackers out there, you know what footprints look like, human footprints by the stride and that. If you see those brown spots coming out of winter, it could be that someone walked on frozen grass. And I've said this for years, do not walk on frozen grass. You can crush the crowns. And John Perry pointed that out in his video, so I thought that was quite interesting. A lot of you may be facing that too now that you're coming out of winter. But the second thing you would look for is maybe the technician had herbicide, and this you would think maybe glyphosate, on his shoes, and he walked through the lawn with that on his shoes. And that could happen when you were doing bed weed control. We would often use glyphosate for that, for spot sprays, and maybe you blanket sprayed an area, didn't realize you walked back through it, and then you went across the lawn to get to your next spot, and bing, bang, boom, you kill the lawn in a couple of spots. Those are some things you might start to look for as you're kind of being a detective, especially, again, when I was working for True Green Chem Lawn at that time. That might be something that I would kind of look for. But I realized that neither one of these were the case, because even though there were 7 or 8 spots in succession, they didn't look like strides. I could just tell, right? Now, the homeowner wasn't home at the time. He was at work, because I'm sure, he was off. He's a rich guy making a lot of money somewhere. And so I was there by myself. And what I did is, the first thing I did is I took my soil probe and I jammed it into each one of these holes right down the middle. And it would go maybe 2 inches in, maybe, and I would hear this kerplunk. I could feel it. I was hitting rock, right? In every single hole, all 8 of them. Every one of them, same exact thing. Bing, 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 bang, right? Right in there. And so I knew what it was. There's something under there. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something. So I went ahead and left a note, and I told the gentleman, and by the way, I did some other research too, right? I knew what had been sprayed on the property. I knew what the property, or what the expected results of those products were. Would there be any way that these products could have made this damage using the equipment that my technician used? What was the wind on the day? These are all things we look at, and this is a lot of reasons why you keep these records when you do this for a living, not just for problems, but you do it for anything, just so if something doesn't go right, you have the records to understand what was done, and then you can kind of work your way through the evidence. This is why I tell you guys to keep a lawn journal too. Same thing. If something happens in the lawn and you know what you've been doing, you have a history of that, you can eliminate some things pretty quickly. But either way, I had been through all of that, and again, once I jammed that soil probe down in that hole and felt those hard rocks underneath every single one of those holes, I knew what it was. And what it is the roots do fine. Everything looks good up through April because the temperatures are cool enough. But then as soon as you do get a couple of those warm days in June, when there's a rock under there or a brick, it sucks the moisture right out, as well as it sucks in more heat, and it literally puts the lawn in that spot into summer dormancy, just like that, because of that heat. So that's what a rock underneath the surface does. And these were only a couple inches down. If you have larger rocks, say 6 or 7 inches down, you may not see anything, even though I have seen those areas too. Those just show up later in the summer, the hotter it gets. But either way, I hope you're following the line here. And so I left that information for him, and he wasn't there. I wrote him out a nice long letter, and if you guys get my emails, you know how I'm overly detailed. I used to be the same way in my notes when I worked for True Green that I would leave for customers. I would turn things over and write on the back and just, all kinds of stuff I would write on because I wanted to leave really good details to educate the customer. And so I went back to the office, and then later on that afternoon, I called him to follow up and talk to him. And he basically called BS on me, literally, like told me almost straight up that I was lying to him. And so I said, did you go out and do that, or did you go out and test this yourself? And of course he said no. He said totally not the case, not possible. Blah blah blah. He's going to sue us. He's going to call the state chemist. All of these things, right? I said, okay, let's do this. I'll meet you out there. I'll show you. I'll show you. And he agreed. And so the next day I went out and I met him after hours because he had to stay at work. I had to wait for him to get home from work, and I did. And I literally dug out these holes, 3 of them, and every single one of them had one of the bricks, one of the ends of the bricks where, I don't do that kind of construction, but I'm sure that there are many times you have to cut a brick in half to fill a space or whatever to end a row properly to keep your running bond looking right. And so that's what was in each one of these. We dug out 3 of them, and I pulled them out and handed to him. And I even said, I got a little smart ass. I said, look at that. I said, that brick right there matches the brick scheme that you and your wife chose for your house. And by the way, it looks really good, Mr. Blankety Blank. I think the choice you made on your bricks is great, but they don't work too well in the lawn, wouldn't you guess? And that was it. The guy basically shook my hand and gave me that peakish thank you, but no sorry, or I'm sorry I was a jerk. We never got that. That's why my lawn pros that listen, I understand some of the stress that you go through when you have to work with customers that, like to remain ignorant like that. If you do jam something down in there and you're not feeling rocks or construction debris or whatever, okay, then get down on your hands and knees anyway and dig. Be observant. When you change levels like that, you'd be surprised how your perspectives change. By the way, don't be afraid to sniff the brown spots. You can smell if it's urine, you'll smell it. Now, I'm not telling you to get gross with it, but I'm literally telling you to use your senses in there. Do you see things like frass, which would be elimination from bugs, a sticky substance, a residue? There's all kinds of different things that you can see when you get down in there. You could look at lesions on the leaves of the grass, and you could look at the shapes of those lesions and take pictures with your cell phone and then go in and look at university websites and compare. So lots of things you can do with those brown spots besides just immediately thinking that you might want to have to throw down a chemical. But whatever you do, if you do have those brown spots in your lawn and you are somebody that has a service, because I know a lot of y'all that listen to this podcast, you actually have lawn services that take care of your grass, and you listen to the podcast because you're interested in maybe someday doing your own, or you're just interested in knowing more about what they're doing or how you can enhance it or how you can just get more out of what you're already paying for. So I would always caution you that when something looks bad in the lawn, don't first blame the lawn guy. Go out and do a little bit of research on your own. The other thing that will do is it will allow you to make some assumptions ahead of time, and don't make them the wrong way, but it'll allow you to gather some facts that you can then share when you do call out your lawn professional if you feel like you need to. So with that, I really hope that you'll take that to heart and that you'll start changing levels, get down, look at those brown spots, and then when in doubt, jam a rod down inside of them and see what's under there. All right, so with our first question, we're going right off of I-75, Knoxville, Tennessee. This is Andy W., and here's what Andy's question is this week. Alan, love your enthusiastic videos and was excited to see your podcasts as I get to listen to them on my commute. I bought a new house this winter in Knoxville. First off, Andy, congratulations on your new house, bro. Knoxville is a beautiful city. Love the mountain views right around there. So at least I know they're not considered giant mountains in a lot of places, but from those of us in Florida, Knoxville has mountains. So I bought a new house this winter in Knoxville, and I'm so excited to have a large lawn for my kids to run around on. Unfortunately, by the time I started to think about my yard, it was too late to plant or resod a cool season grass. My yard currently has every kind of weed growing in it except for turf grass. We have moss, monkey grass, clover, wild violet, English ivy. The only grass growing is a 10 by 10 patch that the city planted after doing underground work last fall. Also, the past few weeks, I've been clearing overgrown sections of my yard that had bushes and English ivy. In my opinion, my yard is a loss for this season, but I'm really excited for what I can do next spring. I plan on killing it all in late summer, early fall doing a resod with fescue like my neighbors have. I'll probably be reaching out with more questions or to my local YouTube celebrity and his channel, The Grass Factor, for steps on that later. However, my question today is, what can I be doing to my lawn or soil this season to set myself up for success for my fall lawn renovation when ultimately I'll be killing everything off? So first of all, your problem, Andy, is I love that you bought a new house, but the fact that your favorite YouTube celebrity is Matt Martin of The Grass Factor just took you down at least 3 points in my book, possibly 4. Other than that, though, I'll be glad to give you some advice. So the first thing I want you to do, because basically what Andy's talking about here, folks, is he's got a salad bar. He's not going to be able to do anything right now for it, and he's going to start messing with it in the fall. So he's like, what do I do now with my salad bar? Andy, the first thing I would tell you to do is get into the habit of mowing twice a week. Just do it. I know it's a salad bar and I know it's all weeds, but just get out there, because what you're going to learn while mowing that salad bar is you're going to learn your land. You're going to be observant. You're going to know where the bumps are. You're going to know where the ruts are. You're going to know where the certain kind of weed grows here but not there because it's in the shade. Wow, in July, that tree really shades that area over there, but wow, when we get to September, it's not such an issue. You're going to realize that the sidewalk heats up here and that this area over here grew crabgrass faster than that one. There's all that. You're going to realize that I get out of my car on this side and the kids trample it down and the weeds aren't actually growing there because of all the foot traffic. There's all these things that by going out and mowing twice a week and getting that habit, even though it's a salad bar and it's going to be painful to look at, you're still going to learn your land, especially that part about the leveling and all that. Again, I get all these questions about leveling a lawn. There is no good answer for that. Once you have a turf grass in there, there is not an easy answer for leveling out massive bumps. But you, Andy, because you're not going to do the major work until the fall, you have the luxury of walking that land and learning every bump. So when you do your complete redo, your complete renovation, you're able to go ahead and correct those areas because you know where they are. So that's one of those things. Now, the other thing that might happen, though, is by doing that frequent mowing, you might be surprised at what grass is actually there that you can't see right now, because sometimes it's hard to see when all those weeds are blinding you. It's hard to see the goodness that lurks beneath in your turf grass, right? And there might be some there. And if you start doing frequent mowing, just that cultural practice, and that's what we call that, is good cultural practice, is good mowing. Just from that good mowing and cultural practice, you might find that some turf kind of goes, thanks, Andy, and starts growing and taking a foothold. So that is something to think about too. Now, the other thing I said, you got a 10 by 10 spot there you said the city took care of, and that's cool. I recommend you pick that spot or maybe a spot next to it and start working on it. The 10 by 10, fert that thing, man. Put down some pre-emergent in there. I know it's only small, but work on it. Understand what that feels like. What's that look like? How do I mix the products? It's 10 by 10. So maybe you expand that a little bit and do the seeding now. Just do it. Just learn how the seed grows. Fight the weeds that come in along the way. Maybe you try a little, mesotrione. We're going to talk about that later. Scott starter with some mesotrione in there to help you out, to preventative. But what I'm saying is pick an area and experiment. Don't waste this time. Pick a small area and experiment with it and learn it and just see what you can do with that just from seeding now and working it hard. I mean, you have that opportunity, right? You're kind of on a blank slate here. It's a blank canvas. You can screw it up a little bit and just paint over it, right? Just reprime it if you have to. So see what you can do in a little spot and see what you come out with and learn along the way. So that's what I would recommend for you, Andy. All right, now we're going to head down south. We're going to talk to Mark H., and Mark H. is in Pearland, Texas. Mark says, Alan, I'm 30 years old from Pearland, Texas, and we have St. Augustine grass, but I can't afford all the expensive weed killers that you show on your YouTube videos. I can do spot sprays and I can do oversprays, but I'm having a bad problem with weeds and Dallas grass. What do you recommend? So this is a good question, Mark, because I want to make sure that I get some things out to you guys so that you understand, because I don't want to be known as a guy that tries to be elitist with you and tells you that you should only be buying the most expensive weed controls. And in fact, I want you to know that I really try hard to make it the other way around. So let me reiterate my philosophy here on weed control. And we're talking about post-emergent selective weed controls. Post-emergent meaning after weeds have come up, now we're going after them. This particular weed control goes after weeds that have already come up. So that's what post-emergent means. And selective means it's only going to kill selective plants and not harm your turf grass. That's why it's called selective. The other term being a non-selective herbicide, which would be the main one you guys are going to know is glyphosate or the brand name Roundup. Non-selective means it kills everything. It don't care. It ain't selective about what it kills. okay? So that's a non-selective. So when we're talking here to Mark H, and he says, hey, he doesn't have the budget right now for these expensive weed controls that I recommend, he's saying, hey, what can I do? And what I want to tell you is I recommend that the first thing that you do, especially as a beginner, is you get something over the counter. Go to Ace, go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, go to Menards, go to True Value, wherever you need to go, and get something there. Now, you have a couple different products that you can choose from. In most cases, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that there's no bad signal words on that weed control, because remember, we want a selective weed control. So if you see something that says weed and grass killer, you don't want that. That's a signal word, right? If you see something that uses like the words burn out or burn down, no, you don't want that stuff, right? What you want is kills weeds, not the lawn. Safe for lawns, weed control for lawns. Those are the terms that you want to look for. Once you find that, then you want to just make sure that your grass type is listed on the back. Now in Texas, with St. Augustine grass, that's very important. And you want to make sure that the grass type St. Augustine is okay, because in the South, our grass types are quite different. And especially St. Augustine and Centipede, they cannot handle the same types of weed controls that Bermuda and Zoysia can. And then Bahia grass is a whole nother issue. So in the South, in warm season, be very careful and make sure you read that label by knowing your grass type. But up north, if you have the cool season grasses like turf-type tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, or any of the other fescues, you're pretty much going to be okay where you're at. 2,4-D dicamba, these are the active ingredients that are there. I still want you to look on the label and make sure your grass type is listed, but a little bit more leeway, a little bit more freedom with the cool season. So the first thing you do is go to the store and get something over the counter, is what I call it. Those are going to be very inexpensive. You can even get what they call ready to spray. And what ready to spray is a hose-in sprayer. And what's in there is the weed control. And as you hook your hose up and you turn that puppy on, it mixes the weed control in the water on the fly in real time dynamically, and squirts it out on the lawn. It's the easiest way to go. I mean, we're talking in this area, I can get an RTS ready to spray, $10 to cover 5,000 square feet. That is a bargain. And I will tell you that it will work well. In fact, my friend here, Mark, because you have St. Augustine grass, you're going to want to look for Image for Southern Lawns. It's got a purplish label, and it's going to say labeled for St. Augustine grass, but it can also be used on Bermuda and Zoysia. It's actually, I guess you could say it's a clone of a particular type of weed control called Avenue South that is an expensive, very expensive weed control for professionals. And I say very expensive because it's only available in like 2.5 gallons, because they don't really care much for homeowners. So they don't sell it that way. So you have to make that big investment up front. And that's what Mark H is talking about when he talks about the professional weed controls. It's not that they're really that more expensive on an application basis. The more professional, we'll use that term, I'm using air quotes here, the more professional weed controls, actually, when you do the math, are cheaper by the 1,000 square feet. But you have to make a large investment up front, because most of these manufacturers don't make their products for DIYers, as much as I might try to get them to do that. They are making their products for pros, and pros do acreage. Pros aren't buying based on 5,000 square foot increments. They're buying based on acres. That's how they run their businesses. We run based on 1,000 square feet, and most of you guys are at 5, maybe 6,000, right? So you'd have to invest in an amount that could cover acres in some cases up front. That's your big nut that you have to crack up front. But then that might last you for 5 years. We've seen this in several cases where when you do buy those, you make that higher investment up front of like, a Celsius or something at $124. That'll last you like 5 years, especially if you don't have to blanket spray that often, which you won't. But the good news for you is that this Avenue South, they didn't want to work with Allen Hayne, the lawn care nut, but they work with Image, and they create a more, I'm using air quotes again, a more watered down version. In other words, it's the Avenue South active ingredients. They're just at lower concentrations because it's a homeowner blend. I think they do that for some fudge factor, this and this and that. Maybe something to do with labeling. I don't know all the ins and outs, and that's probably why PBI Gordon decided to play ball with Image and not Allen Hayne. I'm being a little bit overly funny here, but I did approach them. But either way, what I'm getting at is get that over the counter. That is a great product, and it mirrors a professional product. And I can tell you, Mark, that it's going to eliminate a good amount of the weeds that you're facing there in your St. Augustine grass. So I don't think that's an expensive investment to make, and I think that's where I would like you to go first. Now, once you have gone through and used those over-the-counter weed controls and you've eliminated, I will tell you, in most cases, about 80% of the weeds will be eliminated through that strategy. And when I say 80%, I don't mean 80% of all the kinds of weeds, but typically most of the lawns out there, you're going to have one dominant weed and your weed control will kill it. So I mean 80% overall of the weed coverage will be eliminated, and then you'll be left with a little bit of something that couldn't handle. And that's where you identify that specifically, and then you get a specialty product just for that one or two items that remain. In your case, Dallas grass. Now, I'll tell you, my friend, I don't know that there is anything for Dallas grass and St. Augustine grass. I don't know of a cure there. So the only thing that you could do that I know of to get rid of Dallas grass and St. Augustine grass would be a non-selective herbicide of glyphosate, and that kills everything. So that's a whole nother issue. But by the way, glyphosate is really, really cheap. So that ain't expensive either. But I'm not telling you to go do that. I don't necessarily, your situation might be a little bit further down the road than that, not something I can necessarily solve for you here on a podcast. But what I'm getting at is, Mark, is go get that over-the-counter stuff, see what you can do with that, put that down. That's very affordable. That's economical. Get yourself as far down the road as you can, and then you can go after things later on or decide to live with them. There's nothing wrong with eliminating a good portion of the weeds, having a healthy stand of turf grass, and then living with a few weeds here and there, knowing that you've done a good job or you've gotten as far as you can, or maybe you're going to just see how far down the line you can get with really good mowing practices. With that, let's head all the way up to the northeast to Rochester, New York. This is Renee G. Alan, I have been watching and following for quite some time now. In the winter, we build an ice rink for our kids in the backyard. Last summer, I brought in about 30 yards of topsoil to regrade and reseed my backyard. The area we're talking about, it's about 40 foot by 50 foot, and I am questioning if I should just reseed this spring and skip the pre-emergent and just deal with crabgrass later, as this is a very new area. Typically, this area bounces back quickly in the spring, and I am thinking it might not, as I have noticed so far. I've been out and raked a couple of times, and I'm seeing some bare spots, which I do not think are going to bounce back. I have a 3.5 and a 6-year-old who also play on the lawn, so I am trying to avoid any bare spots. I need to make the decision this weekend. What do you recommend? All right, so now I'll say Renee, that name can be a man or a woman, so I'm not sure here, Renee. I'm sorry if I say it the wrong way, but I will say that this is a great one to talk through. Now, this is a little bit complicated here, and I kind of debated whether I would address this on the podcast, but I think it's good because we have a lot of things going on here. But what this does is this illustrates to me Renee's good strategic thinking, and also the fact that Renee has some experience and has learned her land. So let's think about that. Let's look at what we're talking about. The first thing is, Renee tells me that she's got a 40 by 50 area, so that's 2,000 square feet. So just picture 2,000 square feet in your mind. I can picture that because I've walked that. Hopefully you've measured your lawn and you've walked that. So 2,000 square feet. It's not a large area to manage, but it's also not super, super tiny. The second thing is that she's built an ice rink in her backyard. So we're going to consider that super heavy traffic, right? By the way, some of you might be noticing areas of your lawn where your kids built a snowman in the lawn. Those areas will recover slower in the spring and could even be dead if the crowns are cracked. So if you have a big brown spot in the middle of your lawn, consider, did you build a snowman there? She's got an ice rink, and she says, hey, in the past, though, the lawn's recovered fine from it. So what we're realizing is that Renee's got some experience here because she's been through this before. She says, though, last year she brought in topsoil and she did a regrade and stirred everything up, right? So I don't know why there was a rehab done, but that's what they did, and that's cool. Appreciate that, but that's another thing we need to know. And then she's made an observation based on experience that she does have larger bare spots, and she's like, based on what I know here from the past, these areas are a little bit too large to fill in. So those are the things we're thinking about. The first thing is that when you bring in topsoil, that's a little bit of a wild card because I don't know what's in that topsoil. In fact, it's really scary. You could look back in my history, and I don't think I typically recommend bringing topsoil in anywhere. Maybe I've used some lawn soil, like from bags from Scott's lawn soil kind of stuff that I can figure is clean, but I do not recommend bringing in just giant gobs of topsoil. I just don't, because I don't know what's in there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when you do a rehab, and Renee said she did in the backyard, you're stirring everything up. So you're stirring things up from underneath the soil that may have been left to be buried for a long time and should have been left there to be forgotten, but those seeds now come back up and now they can pose a problem. So whenever you do, and that's why you don't hear me recommend complete burn down and redos too often, because it just can bring in too many other problems from stirring things up. It also can kill microbe populations and all kinds of other things. But either way, Renee did that. It's cool. You did it, Renee. Awesome. And I know you learned a lot from it. And it sounds like you got good results because you got things to grow. So that's awesome. But these are just things we're all considering here, right? Because Renee's already weighing it out. Do I seed now and just fight the crabgrass? Or, and I'm talking about you stirred a lot of stuff up last year. You brought in some topsoil that may have some foreign material in it. But I understand the kids need to play too, right? We got that area. We got to think. We got some bare spots back there, and the kids need to play. So let's talk through this just a little bit. Let's talk through the strategy here. If you were to seed, if you decided to seed right now, Renee, then you would not put down your prodiamine, you would not put down pre-emergent, and you would have to hope to fight crabgrass or other weeds or whatever came up, mostly crabgrass. You'll fight that later. But the other thing you're going to do when you seed now is you are going to have to let any weeds that start coming in. We're coming right into the warm period in Rochester, right? If you seed now, you're not really going to be able to spray post-emergent weeds either. So dandelions and everything else that come up are going to have to be left to run. So that's something to consider. And depending what weed control you use, it's going to be at least 2 mowings after they start to grow, or after germination, it'll be at least 2 mowings. So you're going to have at least 30 to 45 days there where you can't spray post-emergent weeds too. So that's just something to consider. Another one of those things that you're going to have to fight and go up against. So now that you've kind of weighed some of those things out, and again, I know the kids need to be able to have a spot to play, I would rely on your experience and your gut and your intuition to tell you to do the right thing. If those areas are too big to fill in, if it's not 30% turf, then you're probably going to have to seed. And then what I would say is, because you're more advanced, Renee, I can just tell by the way you write and by the way you're thinking through the strategy. And that's what I tell you guys always, is think through the strategy this way. I would recommend you try something like some of that Scott's starter with mesotrione in it. It's basically tenacity, and a lot of people will use that at seeding because it does help stop crabgrass, and I think it's even labeled to stop dandelions. I don't know if that will work or not, because a lot of dandelions are biennial or whatever, right? They come back, is it perennial? Biennial? Anyway, they live for 2 years, so it's not going to prevent those, but it may prevent new ones from coming up. So either way, I would try some of that. Maybe you also try some other spot-type seeding methods. Maybe you use some Scott's Patchmaster, and it sounds like I'm a Scott's fanboy here. These are just the things that I've used over the years. But what I'm saying is, Renee, maybe try to do a little bit of a combination of this and a little bit of combination of that and work your way through it. Maybe you do some traditional type, pre-emergence around other areas of the lawn. You switch to some liquids, but a lot of different things that you can do. Just keep in mind, if you do use that mesotrione, you're only going to get 6 weeks of pre-emergence control out of it. Because I know I'm going to get a bunch of questions that say, Alan, why don't you recommend people use tenacity as their main pre-emergent? That's because prodiamine that we use in normal situations, which is what most of you guys are in, will last you months, right? If you put down 6 pounds per 1,000 of prodiamine, you are going, on our product that we use, 0.38% granular, you're going to get 5 to 6 months of pre-emergence control. Whereas this mesotrione here, the max rate I believe that it can give you is 6 weeks. So you'd have to reapply. So it works good for seeding, but you keep in mind here, Renee, that you are only going to get 6 weeks out of that. So if you seed with that mesotrione, just realize you're going to have a strategy at that 6-week mark of where do you go before that. And you have to read some labels, maybe some dithiopy or something like that. But I think without getting too confusing, Renee, I think that's what I would try to do. I would try to go ahead and do a little bit of advanced strategy here, try to do some seeding in the spring, because I trust that when you rake those areas and you see those bare spots, you know your land, because again, I can tell by the way you write, that you know your land and you know those areas are not going to thicken up. You know they've been beat up by that ice rink, and you also know that the grass itself is not super established because you just did it last fall. I think you answered your own question. The best thing to do, Renee, is go ahead and try that seed here in the spring. With that, let's go all the way out west now. Let's go out towards Salt Lake City, Utah, and we're going to talk here to Brian. Alan, I'm really mad at you. You got me all obsessed with my lawn, and now I am losing sleep over it due to massive anxiety attacks. I have watched too many of your videos to count and read up on as much as my schedule allows, but I really need some help with weed identification. I live in Salt Lake City and I have a hard time finding information on the type of weed that I have growing on the south side of my house where the lawn gets blasted with lots of sun. The heat also radiates off the side of the house and onto the grass. This grass grows faster than my turf-type tall fescue and my Kentucky bluegrass with vines down to the ground. The weed grass does not have a single blade, but multiple blades coming off of a central stalk. I think it is bent grass. All that being said, I really need a professional to hold my hand and whisper, "It's all right," so I can identify some of these weeds so I can be sure. What do you recommend I do? And he also asks, I am also just going to plan on buying Tenacity to take care of these weeds because it seems to be a great selective herbicide that I can use on crabgrass and what I think is bent grass without killing my lawn. Your thoughts? All right, so I have an easy answer for this one. But first thing is, Brian, no stress in lawn care. We do not allow stress in lawn care. And I know you're just kidding about it, but please don't stress out over this. You're going to live in that house for 40 years, bro. It's okay to have a little bit of problems with it right now because you'll be ahead of it 40 years later, I promise. Now, with that, I don't want you to always think about having to use a chemical. I don't know how big the side of your house is or how big this spot is, but I'm going to take a little bit of liberties here since you didn't tell me. And I'm going to guess that this is a small spot. I'm just going to guess that the spot is not that large. And what I would caution or encourage you to do is instead of going for a chemical, get out there and dig it up and resod. Literally drop a few pieces of sod, super cheap, blot out the sun, and hope for the best. That's no chemical, that's surgery. But what that'll do is it'll help you get down in there and understand exactly how big the problem really is, where it's at. It'll also help you understand the lay of the land right there, as well as going forward, then you might be able to control it with some hand pulling or whatever. But the idea being, don't always just reach for a chemical because you have one spot on the side of your house. What I would rather you do is use some surgical methods, use some physical labor, and literally cut the problem out, go out even a few feet away from it, and just resod the area. I think that's a better way to go. Now, is Tenacity a good weed control? Yes. Does it work on bent grass? If it's labeled for it, I would say go for it. I'm not sure, honestly. I've never used Tenacity for that reason. But if it's labeled for it, that could be something you use later on. Once you do the surgical method, when small amounts of this bent grass or whatever it is come back, if you find out that Tenacity controls it, then yes, use it that way. But I always encourage you to not reach for a chemical first. Try to do something surgical. And there is no shame in that sod game, especially if you're blotting out the sun. So I hope that helped you out there, Brian. And again, my friend, no stress. Now, this next one, this is going up to Minnesota, and I get this question quite a bit. Here we go. Hello, Alan. I read your article on pre-emergent for lawns. I have large dogs, and I'm concerned about putting down chemicals to control weeds and crabgrass. Can you advise me on what types of products I can use that are pet safe for controlling weeds and crabgrass? And that one comes from Henry. So, Henry, I'm going to give you and everyone else here, I'm going to give you the kind of the stock answer because I'm going to tell you right now, there is not a good answer for this because everybody's definition of the word safe is different. The other thing is everybody's definition of the word chemical is different. Think about this. Water is a chemical that is dangerous to a man that cannot swim if he falls overboard of your boat. Then water becomes a very dangerous chemical to that man. But I can sit here and drink water right now, and everything's all good. Now, I'm using a big, wide, weird illustration there, but I want you to understand that. The other thing, the word safe. Let me just say this. Anytime you put something on your lawn at all, there is a negligible risk involved with that. There are people that are allergic to everything. There are people that are allergic to peanuts. There are people that are allergic to oranges. There are people, you know what I'm saying, right? So whatever you put on your lawn poses a negligible risk. There is a risk. I don't care if it's organic. I don't care if it's filtered through angel's wings. I don't care. It has a risk. So just think about that. Your dogs could be allergic to any fertilizer. I'm not trying to say this to scare anyone because now when you get into pesticides, those would be, if we're talking about pre and post emergence for weeds, those are herbicides. But you also have fungicides that go after fungus and disease. You have insecticides that go after insects, obviously. You have all kinds of other categories, right? We are talking, though, about herbicides. These are things that affect plants. The pre-emergents in this case, they affect cell division in the young plants. The post-emergents, they kind of act like a steroid and they move through the plant and they cause it to just, for lack of a better term, blow itself out. There's a lot of different ways that these work. And when you look at the way that they work, it can be a little bit scary. It's chemistry, right? So my thing is, I'm not going to tell you what is safe for your dogs. I will tell you that there are some organic type products out there that don't work. If somebody sells you an organic weed control that's iron-based or whatever, that will not work. You can tell them I said it. You can lead them right here. It might make the weeds a little bit sad for a little bit. It might make the weeds go, what did you just put on me? It smells bad. It smells like vitamins. It smells like Flintstone vitamins, but the weeds are not going to die. Corn gluten is a pre-emergent. I've never tried it, but I know I've talked to many people that have, and I think from what I can tell, it takes a lot of years to build up in the soil and still doesn't work. So as much as I would love there to be an organic weed killer, there isn't. Now, does it mean that you can't do things like hand pulling? It doesn't mean that you can't do things like mowing a lot for cultural control that way. Those are all things that you can do that are super helpful and super friendly. Growing a high tolerant grass or a thick turf stand. I've even suggested to people that don't want to do chems at all, that they're concerned about their pets, then go the other way and just hammer that lawn with organic fertilizer, which should have the least risk, right? If you're going to think about it in that way. And then just seed every month. Just keep throwing down seed, just keep watering, just try to outgrow everything in there. You could do that. So there's a lot of different things you can do, but I can tell you that I am never going to be somebody that's going to tell you that anything that you put on your lawn is people safe or pet safe. Everything poses a negligible risk. The other thing, though, is I like to practice what's called integrated pest management. And basically what that means is that you use the least hard chemical control as possible. And the best example I can give you of that is why I don't typically recommend weed and feed products. Now, if you have a lawn that is 100% blown up with dandelions from corner to corner, edge to edge, east to west, north to south, then yes, a weed and feed works good because it's going to cover everything and it's granular and it's much easier for you to do. However, if you only have patches of weeds over there and that shade over there, and you have no weeds over there, and you have thick turf over there and tons of weeds over there and nothing in the middle, I don't want a weed control that way, because a weed and feed is a granular product and you can't control where the weed control goes, so it goes everywhere, and you're throwing weed control in areas that don't need it. That is integrated pest management, by not using a weed and feed product. And instead, in that case, where you have these areas with weeds, is you use a liquid and you spot spray or zone spray. That's going to use only the chemical where it's needed, and it's not going to be where it's not. That is integrated pest management. That makes sense? Another way that you could exercise integrated pest management would be for grub worms. A lot of you guys are going to be talking about that. We'll be talking about grubs coming up. But you can put down a preventative, and I'm talking about most of you guys up north with cool season grass. You can put down a preventative, which would be a blanket application to your entire lawn. You can put that down like in late May or early June and protect yourself against grubs. Or the integrated pest management approach would say, hey, if there hasn't been grub damage in this lawn or neighboring lawns within the last couple years, there's probably not going to be damage in mine. So what I will do is not put down the grub preventative. I will not use that extra chemical. And later on down the road, I'll be observant. And if I get a few brown spots coming out of summer, I will dig and verify that those areas have grubs. And I will spot treat with a product that kills on contact, like a Dilox, and I will spot treat then. That's another way to do integrated pest management. So that's what I would recommend, Henry, if you're concerned, is to consider either nothing at all like that, or one of those strategies, or an integrated pest management type of a strategy. But again, I'm just leery about telling you that everything is safe, because everything is definitely not always safe for every single person or every single living thing.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Listen, this is Alan coming to you from the editing room studio. I actually haven't had to interrupt one of these podcasts in quite a while, but the subject matter that I just covered there can be quite sensitive, and I just wanted to say I'm not trying to scare anyone. First and foremost, whenever you use or apply anything to the lawn, your number one goal is to follow the label. The label is there to instruct you and to keep you within the lanes and the guidelines and within the laws, and to keep everything on par and keep everything as safe as possible. So follow the label, wear the protective equipment that you're supposed to wear, look for the re-entry times, because labels will tell you a re-entry time. It will also tell you wind speeds. It'll tell you things like temperature restrictions. It'll tell you where you can and can't spray. It'll tell you the grass types to use. All of these different things are on that label in order to help you be as safe as you possibly can. Read the label and follow it. And with that, let's get right back out into the garage.
Now with that, let's go all the way down south here, and we're going to go into our recordings now. I've got a couple this week. I have really appreciated you guys that call in. If you do want to call in on the line, it's 833-LCN-TIPS, 833-LCN-TIPS, TIPS, 833-LCN-TIPS. You can leave us a message there. And, I love hearing the voices. Just so you guys know, I like hearing your voices. I like people's accents. I think, I try to do a Chicago accent over here 2-3 times every podcast. Talk about the grace over there by Naperville, Illinois, I like to do accents, and I like hearing the different accents. I hope you guys aren't offended by that. I just like hearing your regional dialect. I always get a kick out of that. That also helps me connect with you, so I like hearing that. So we're going to go now to a couple of recordings that we have, and the first one is coming out of Trussville, Alabama.
Hey, what's up, Alan? My name is Garrett. I live in Trussville, Alabama. Getting ready to do a big project, and I'm actually killing off the yard and everything like that. But in the back, my main question is, you've done a lot of questions, or you've answered a lot of questions about, is it too late to throw down a pre-emergent? Is it not? Blah, 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 temperature windows and everything like that. When do you typically throw down your first malorganite, first fertilizer? I've seen some guys on the YouTubes, they're saying, hey, I'm not going to push my grass until it wakes up a little bit more. Is there a temperature zone for when you know to throw down your fertilizers and malorganites? Thanks so much. Bye.
So Garrett, this is a great question, but I first want to ask, and you'll have to email me or something, or Twitter me, or tweet me. Did you pronounce it Trussville on purpose? Because I have a good friend that lives there named Rick, and he pronounces it Trussville. Trussville. Like the ville is a vole. Trussville. Trussville, Alabama. Where are you from? Trussville. Trussville. So, anyway. Also, I have a really good friend that lives right in your area, Jason Creel. He's got a company called Alabama Lawn Pros. He's also got a YouTube channel called Lawn Care Life. You guys should check it out. Super good dude, friend of mine. So Garrett, let's go through what you're talking about, and you're talking about soil temps. So you're exactly right. 55, as we're approaching 55. That's when we put our first prodiamine down, but you are long past that in Trussville. So you're wondering, when is the best time to throw down your first application of fertilizer? So for me, I say it's when soil temperatures are at 65. That's when your warm season turf is going to start to wake up. Now, Zoysia and Bermuda, a little bit slower than maybe St. Augustine would be, but 65 is at that time when they're going to start to grow. You will notice also, if you've been following me this year, that I'm recommending that the first application be organic. Now, I like malorganite, but you could use any of the clones out there. I don't know what you can find in Alabama. If you can find the Sunnyland All Natural is the great clone that is made here in Florida. My friend Lee Moore over at Sunnyland makes that one. Or you can find another brand of organic fertilizer. Maybe you like Ringer or some others I'm hearing about. But I'm recommending you just go out the gates with that organic fertilizer. And with that, I'm saying you could go out not as early as you want. I wouldn't go out super early, because the reason people tell you to wait is they don't want to burst the lawn to grow and then get a freeze or a frost that stunts it. That's really what you're concerned about. And I will tell you that Zoysia will really be affected by that. Bermuda too, but not quite as bad. So that's why they don't want you to push it too hard. But if you're using an organic, that's going to come up slowly. The microbes will start breaking the organic down, the malorganite or the Sunnyland or whatever you have. As temperatures cross 55, the microbes come up. They will start working at 55. When you get to 65, they're obviously really hopping better, and then 70 and above. But as you can picture, as the microbes wake up at the 55, which everything wakes up at 55, just so you guys know, you guys are seeing that, right? The crabgrass wakes up at 55. The lawns start to wake up at 55. I mean, everything starts to happen around that time. The microbes are also waking up around that 55. We have some organic fertilizer in, though, for those bad boys to start munching on, and that's going to be a nice slow release for those roots as your warm season turf starts to come into season. So that's why I like to start out with that organic fertilizer right as soil temperatures are hitting that 65, or pretty much as soon as you want to, my friend. So that's what I recommend there for the warm season turf. So where you're at there in Trussville, I would say you are good to throw down. All right, let's go to our next recording. And remember, that's 833-LCN Tips. If you want to call in and ask a question on the podcast, Lawns Across America, 833-LCN Tips, TIPS. Let's go now to Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Hi, Alan. This is Will down in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I just moved here a year ago from New York, and I'm switching to warm season lawns, Bermuda grass or zoysia. My new lot is small, under 5,000 square feet. What do you think about an electric mower? Thanks.
Will from Chapel Hill from New York. Now, I'm going to guess, Will, that your New York accent is an upstate New York accent, maybe even like, Western New York. I don't know the state that well, but you don't have that heavy accent that we're going to hear a little bit later, which I love. I've told you, I love New York accents. I can't do one, but I'm going to try. But let's talk about, or I'm not going to try, I should say, but let's talk about electric mowers. I'd love to talk a little bit of equipment here today. I think that'd be fun. That's why I chose this one out. So the first thing is, and my first advice to any of you guys, especially you, Will, in Chapel Hill, is choose a mower that you enjoy mowing with. In other words, the most important thing of a mow is to enjoy the mow. That's even more important than the cut quality. Now, the most important things are obviously sharp blade, never remove more than 1/3 of the grass blade's length in a single mowing, that type of thing. Cut at the right height depending on your grass type. That's important. We already know that. But the most important thing over and above with that is that you enjoy it. If you have a mower that you enjoy using, and it doesn't even have to be physically enjoy using, but maybe you enjoy using it because you do feel better about your carbon footprint, and that makes you feel better about mowing. I don't care. Whatever makes you feel good about the mow, I think that's what you should go with. So that's first. And I always try to give a little bit of a different answer out the gate, but I really mean that one. If you have a mower that you like, then you go. That's what I'm saying right there. So that's the first thing. So the next thing is I can see a lot of advantages to using a battery-powered mower. I mean, the first one is that the battery life nowadays has really come a long way, so you have the reliability with that. You may not have had that a few years ago. Now you do. It's not a concern. They also have the life to do it. I mean, I can do my 9,000 square feet here, 10,000 square feet with my Ego on one charge. I have no problem with that. So if they can do a full, 10,000 square foot lawn like that, I think that's good. So you can definitely use them now. In fact, you can use them reliably, which would have been a drawback a couple of years ago. The other thing is you have the option now. You can get, obviously, that same battery can be used in your weed whacker, your edger, your chainsaw, your trimmers, your screw gun, your drill, your radio, your portable speaker, your lights, your generator. I mean, I don't know. The batteries now, if you choose a line of products and stick with that line, you can get that battery and you can end up using that for a lot of things. And that's when you start, having the option to buy these bare tool options, which can save you money. So I think that's an advantage. And then of course, I always tend to run out of gas at the worst time, I've gone to the point now where when I go to the gas station, I use non-ethanol fuel in all of my equipment. I'll buy like 15 gallons because I don't want to run out, right? I leave myself plenty of room to understand when I'm running low. And then I got to store all that, So there's an advantage there with the battery powered, And then of course I mentioned this in the early part, but it does scratch that itch. If you're somebody that wants to reduce your carbon footprint, I think that's a good thing. The other thing is, when I lived in Chicago, a lot of folks, they had super small lawns, and you didn't mention that here, and I doubt you do in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I don't know that area well enough, but I mean, people in Chicago would have literally a postage stamp. It's like 600, 700 square feet. It's too big to do with a weed whacker. You need to have a mower, but there's no room for a shed at all, and there's no outbuilding. So these, electric or battery powered mean you can literally take that in your house and store it, and it just smells like grass. You don't have any gas fumes or anything coming out of it. So I also think that these battery powered mowers offer that for people that live in very small, tight-knit urban communities where you have very small lawns, but you still want to take care of them. These mowers offer nice flexibility there as well. So there you go, Chapel Hill Will. That's my thoughts on battery power. I hope that you'll make a decision that helps you to enjoy the mow first and foremost, my friend. Now let's go back up north to Michigan. We're going to talk a little bit more about pre-emergence.
Hey, Ellen and Ben. My name is Chris. Thank you so much for the opportunity to ask this question. I'm from Linden, Michigan. It's kind of a southeastern Michigan city. My wife and I moved into a new construction home last year. We have a, typical Kentucky bluegrass, fescue rye mix. We dealt with a large crabgrass problem last year, spot treated with some chloride later in the season. So I've been gearing up to obviously following the prodiamine pre-emergent plan for this year. However, my question is, I got some barricade from a local site one nearby. I was reading on the label before I had purchased the product. It was a 5 pounds per thousand max rate. I picked the product up yesterday, and it on the label said 9 pounds per thousand. It's a 0.38. I called back. I wanted to see if they had any more in stock and just kind of get their opinion. And the guy said, well, you probably won't need 9. I wouldn't do that. And I sort of pushed back a little bit. Why, if that's their max, why would you not do it? He didn't really give a ton of clarification. So my question is, would you recommend doing the 9 pounds per thousand with the prodiamine based on what Lesko is recommending? Or what I was thinking as a secondary that you might benefit some others from hearing is do the 5 pounds per thousand prodiamine, and then a little bit later in May or June throw down some dimension or disappear if that's recommended. So curious to know what your thoughts were on that. I appreciate the opportunity to ask the question, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.
Chris, this is a great question. The thing is, it tells me, once again, congratulations on your new house too, bro. It tells me that You are thinking through the strategy. This is great. You're reading labels. You're calling back. You're asking questions. This is great. Now, I can talk about this one because that product is on par with ours. So it's a 0.38% prodiamine product. It's a granular. Okay, so this will work for almost all of them. They should all work the same. Now, everyone needs to read the label on the product that's in your hand, but for the most part, a 0.38% or even a 0.37% prodiamine product granule will work the same. Now, you have two different things. You have recommended application amounts, and then you have yearly, calendar year maximums. So let's first talk about the recommended application amounts. And you should look on the label, and what you're going to find is a little map. All the labels are going to have this. There'll be a little map of the United States, and it will tell you if you put down, and they might all be a little bit different here, but it will say, in this area up here, if you apply 3 pounds per thousand, you get 3 to 4 months control. If you apply 4 pounds per thousand, you get 4 months control. 5 pounds, 5 months. It'll have something like that. It will tell you pounds on the ground and how many months control you get. In another place on the label, it will tell you the minimum amount that you should apply, okay? But it will also tell you the maximum amount that you can apply in a calendar year. In this case, it's 9 pounds per thousand. So the prodiamine product that we're talking about here has a calendar year maximum of 9 pounds per thousand. Now, that is for turf-type tall fescue and warm season turf. You are in Michigan and you have cool season turf, so there's something off here. I believe in Michigan that product has a 6 pounds per thousand calendar year limit. Now, you want to look at that Let's Go product that you have, and all of you that are listening, you want to look at that. But from my knowledge, these prodiamine products have 6 pounds per thousand calendar year limit for Kentucky bluegrass and perennial rye, and 9 pounds per thousand calendar year limit for turf-type tall fescue and all the warm season turfs. But let's just pretend we're talking about that 9 pounds per thousand. That is a yearly maximum. Here's the deal, Chris. You won't need 9 pounds per thousand. If you put down 9 pounds per thousand right now, you're going to get 9 to 10 months of pre-emergence control. And let's just do a little bit of math. You're in April right now, so that's May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. It's too much, bro. It's overkill. You just don't need that much. And by the way, up north, that's why they limit you to 6. I don't think 9 would hurt your grass. I think they limit you to 6 because they know it's just logical, and they're just like, bro, we're going to cut this out. You just don't need that much. As a rule, guys, when you're using these pre-emergent products like we sell, think of 1 pound gives you 1 month. Now, the minimum that you should apply will be on the label because there's a minimum amount that you have to apply just to make it even effective. But as a general rule, 1 pound is 1 month. So if you put down 3 pounds per thousand, you get 3 months control. So in the spring, that's why your friend here from Lesco or from Site 1 or wherever it was recommended 5 pounds per thousand. I think that was smart on that guy. That's a smart recommendation. You're in April. You want to be covered all the way through the fall. If you put down 5 pounds per thousand of that product, you're going to get 5 months of control. So you're going to get April to May, June, July, August, September. That's perfect. And then by the time you get to September, it's worn off and you can throw down your aeration and overseed, baby. But if you would have put down that 9 pounds per thousand, you wouldn't be able to aerate and overseed, because you'd still have so much of that prodiamine left. It'd be like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So that's what his recommendation was, and his recommendation was smart. Now, if you follow my recommendations, I actually recommend doing a split app of 3 pounds and 3 pounds. And you in Michigan, you're still in the perfect window to do that. So if you want to use that prodiamine product you have and you want to do a split app, you put down 3 pounds per thousand now and you wait until soil temperatures are nearing 70 or 40 days and you put down another 3 pounds per thousand. What that does is it essentially gives you a similar control, but it gives you a split app or like 2 coats of paint. So 2 coats of paint are better than 1 heavy coat because the first coat might make some mistakes, might have some errors, something might rub it off a little bit later, so you come in 40 days later with that second light coat and cover up any imperfections. That's a split app, but it will essentially do the same thing as the 1 heavy app. So I hope that makes sense. A little bit more advanced there, but I'm glad you asked that question, Chris, and I can tell you that it sounds to me, read the label on what you have, but it sounds to me like you got good advice from your local Site 1 there. All right, last question. Now, I want to ask this last question here. This one's coming from New York.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dino. I'm up in New York, Long Island. 2 questions. Carbon X, when are you going to be selling it? I'm trying to get some, but not available yet on your website. And number 2, what do you recommend for urine from the dogs on the lawn, urine burns on the dog from the dogs? Thank you.
Hey, Dino from Long Island. I can't do it. I'm going to learn. I love that. Like, Dino, I love your accent, bro. I feel awesome. So, listen, I'm going to learn that one. The problem is I try to do New York and I end up doing Chicago. You know, I don't know. But anyway, so let's talk about the Carbon X. I am confirmed that Carbon X truck is on the road within the next several days. That's what I can tell you. The Carbon X truck is gonna roll within the next several days. Now, it's gonna take a little bit of time after that, not a lot, but I gotta get it checked into the warehouse, gotta get everything inventoried, okay? This is not a small operation now, so we gotta make sure we get all that there. And me and Pete will be rolling that out together. We're working together on that as far as like we're gonna be rolling that out on the same date at the same time. So there you go. There's your Carbon X, Dino. Can't wait to send you out a couple 2-3 bags of the Carbon X over there to Long Island over by there. And now the urine burn. All right, so we get this one a lot. And by the way, you heard in the last question somebody mentioned Ben the Lawn Guardian. Y'all make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to my friend Ben the Lawn Guardian. I got him working with me now, and he helps to organize a lot of these questions that I have, keeps a pulse on what's going on, and lets me know what's coming in here, not only through this call-in line, but also in other areas. So thanks, Ben, for really doing that. I'm glad you got that shout out there. But let's go back to Dino's question here on the dog urine, because Ben's telling me that he's seeing that a lot as well. So here's the deal with the dog urine. It's there. They've been peeing on the snow all year. You know, some pee in the same spot, whatever. Sometimes you have dark green spots, and sometimes you actually have dead spots. Let's just address the dark green spots first. So if your dog pee created dark green areas in your lawn, all you really have to do is just do a good dose of fertilizer. In this case, if you want to clear them up quick, you probably should just go get something that is synthetic that's going to get started quick up there on Long Island. It will level out. I would also back it up with a little bit of Milorganite. Maybe you could go up to 1 pound per 1,000 of N, so a half pound of each, half pound of something quick release. Maybe go over to Walmart. I guess you guys got Walmarts on Long Island. Get the 10-10-10 type of deal. Put that down at 5 pounds per 1,000, which will give you a half pound of N per 1,000. That's the old starter fert start idea. And then 10 pounds per 1,000 of the Milo, which will give you 0.6. That's 1.1 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000. Either way, Dino, not to overtalk you, my friend, if you got the dark green areas, just fert and it'll even out. The grass is only going to get so dark green, so if you just even everything out with heavy fert, it'll just all even out in the wash. And that urine does not affect the lawn for too long. It washes out, so things will even out. Now, if you have the dead spots, if the grass has gotten dead because the dogs peed in the same spot too much, or they were concentrated, or I don't know, maybe you feed your dog something, you let your dog drink too much beer, and he burns the lawn out. I'm not really sure how all that works, but if that's the case, then what I'm going to recommend that you do is first rake the areas out because that grass is dead, flush it with water, and then paint it black with the Humic 12. And I'm going to do my little thing here. Somebody even made a GIF out of it that we might make fun of Brad. Not make fun. We pay homage to our friend Brad at Greene County Fert because he says to take 6 ounces per gallon of the Humic 12 and mix that in that 1 gallon of water and go to that urine spot and just paint it black, paint it black, paint it black, paint it black. That's what he says. And I don't know, but that's how Brad talks. He's like, just go paint it black, paint it black, paint it black. That's what he says. But what we do, me and Paul Castleberry, is we say, paint it black. That's what we do. So that's what you do. You take that humic acid and you paint it black. And apparently what that does is, again, it kicks those microbes up, it gets things going and back in that soil, and it helps things to move. Now, if you want to throw a little bit of seed in there, that's a good idea. Again, this is why I like the Scott's Patchmaster. So paint those spots, flush them out, paint them black with the Humic 12, drop some seed in there, or Scott's Patchmaster, and then you're going to get some spring rains. You should be good, or water as you can. You just avoid pre-emergent in those areas. If you're using a liquid pre-emergent, won't be hard to avoid. If you're using a granular, a little bit harder, but still something you can do. But that's what you want to do. Flush them, Humic 12, and then drop in any kind of grass seed that you want to there, Dino. So thanks for that question. That's a good one. And with that, I'm going to end up this week's podcast. This has been episode 11. It is April 9, 10, 11. We are rolling through the spring here. I want to thank you all for coming along and hanging out with me. I want to thank you for your feedback. I hope that this podcast has been helpful to you. And with that, I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the lawn.